Okay, so first we're going to start by painting our entire cup white, and I am using CC DIY Primetime here. You can also use Pop of Color, however Primetime does tend to dry a little bit quicker, so that's what we're using to base coat this tumbler. So similar to the Pop of Color, you just want to go in thin, even strokes. You don't need a lot of paint here, and you do want to make sure that you are using a soft bristled brush. This will help prevent the brush strokes as well. Because we are going to go over this with ink, I wasn't too worried about full coverage, but I did apply 2 coats here just to make sure that the white would show through underneath the inks. You just want to make sure if you're applying 2 coats like I am here that you do let the first coat dry completely before you do a second coat. So I give it about 15 to 20 minutes, or you can use a heat gun to speed up that process. Once your cup is fully covered and coated to the way you like, you're just going to let that completely dry before we move on to the epoxy. So you don't need a ton of epoxy for this step. I just mixed up 5 milliliters each part A and B epoxy, and then we're just going to apply that over the entire tumbler. We're going to use a little bit more than we would normally for like an epoxy method, so you don't want it too thin, but you also don't want it too runny either. So just apply a good enough amount so the entire cup is covered. Once you've got the tumbler fully covered in your epoxy, now we're going to take our inks and we're just going to drip them in random spots. So I start with one color and then I move on to the next. I typically start with a darker color so it'll help blend better, and then I'll always do my gold last because the gold does spread very quickly. Now, how you do this here is entirely up to you. You can do it in a certain pattern. You can add more ink, less ink, more alcohol. The more alcohol that you add to this, the more lighter it's going to be and more runny. So you'll see here, I just kind of played around with the different colors until it started blending. One thing to keep in mind when you're doing this is that the more alcohol and ink that you add, the more runny it's going to be. So because it's on top of the epoxy, it's going to keep swirling. So the end result that you may get may not look entirely like what you did when you started. So you can just keep playing around with the inks and the alcohol, add as much or as little as you'd like until you get it to that desired pattern. Just like I said, keep in mind that the end result may be slightly different than what you were going for. I also took a toothpick here towards the end and I kind of just swirled things along to spread out that gold some as well. Once you've got your desired look, you do want to let that fully cure. Keep in mind with the inks, it does tend to make the cure time a little bit longer than normal. So now, once that layer is cured, we're just going to apply another coat of epoxy directly over our inks. I just mixed up 10 milliliters each part A and B epoxy, and then I'm going to apply it to the entire tumbler and then just let that cure. So once that is fully cured, now what we're going to do is we're going to make our V-split design. You can totally choose to do another design. I liked this one for this style tumbler, so I'm just taking 2 pieces of tape, and I'll admit I did struggle for about a good 15 minutes trying to line this up perfect, and it still didn't happen, but it was good enough for me, so I just kind of made it into a little V shape how I wanted, and then I'm going to apply my Pop of Color paint directly over my ink. So I'm just going to brush my paint right over the spot that I had taped off. If you get a little on the tape, that's perfectly fine. If you also accidentally get a little bit on the cup where we don't want, it's just paint, so it's super easy to just wipe that excess off too. So we're just going to apply somewhat of a thicker coat here because we are going to use this to apply our glitter. So I'm just painting over that entire spot, and then before that dries, we're going to just dump our glitter directly onto that spot. Make sure that you tap off any of that excess glitter because we don't want that running or moving, so just tap that off. And then the important part here is to make sure you keep the tape on for this step. Don't peel the tape back yet. So with my tape still on, I'm just applying my epoxy directly onto the glitter spot only. So I'm doing it this way so my glitter doesn't spread onto the ink portion of my tumbler. You can definitely seal your cup, your glitter cup first with like triple thick or a clear coat spray, and that will help prevent it, but I still find that the glitter moves regardless, so this is the way that I find that's easiest for me. So once I've got that glitter fully covered with my epoxy, now I'm just going to lift that tape and then I'm going to let that cure on my turner. One thing to keep in mind here, so I am using fast set for this portion of my tumbler because it is a thicker epoxy and it doesn't run and it does cure quicker. If you're using a thinner epoxy like medium viscosity, just keep that in mind as it may start to run throughout your tumbler and you may have to kind of wipe that excess off if you just want it on the glitter portion. So once that is cured and done, now I'm going to just take my foil adhesive. I am using Southern Belle foil adhesive. You can also use Tack It, or you can also just use the spray adhesive, whichever you find best. So I'm just using my silicone brush just to brush that on. Keep in mind when you're using the Tack It or the foil adhesive, you don't want to use a lot. You just want to do kind of a thinner coat and you want to make sure that there are no white streaks, that you have that completely brushed on. So we'll want to let that dry. If you're impatient like me, you can use a heat gun really quick just to kind of speed things along, and then I just do it for 10 to 15 seconds just to kind of make sure it is fully tacky, and then I'll apply my foil directly over to my spot that I want it, and then just simply lift the foil up. You can press down on the foil or even use just a little brush just to kind of rub it down more so that more of the foil does transfer. Or if you're going for kind of like a rustic look and you don't want all of it to transfer, you can just lightly press down. So there is no need to let this dry, it's ready to go. So I just mixed up 10 milliliters each part A and B epoxy, and then I am applying a coat over this entire tumbler. And one thing that I forgot to mention too is I did go ahead and add just a small strip of the washi tape over the edges of my glitter just to kind of hide it and make it look a little nicer. So you can either leave the edges as they are, or you can also do the same thing with just vinyl as well too. So for our cute little topper, what we're going to do, so there's already 2 magnets attached in the topper, so you're going to take the additional 2 magnets and then you're going to place them directly over the magnets that are inside the topper. This is going to help make sure that you align them properly and correctly. I am using UV resin because it's quick and it's easy, but you can also use any type of resin you like. You just need just a small little blob, you don't want too much, and then you're going to place that directly on your lid and then just let that cure. You can also use super glue as well, but UV resin I find is a little bit less messy. So once you have your UV resin cured, now you have a fully removable magnetic topper. Don't forget to add that cute little straw that we included, and then that is it. That makes our tumbler for this month's crate. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I can't wait to see what you create.